So you want to make a scene just like this in about 2 hours. Not a problem. Let's begin. First start with the plane. Then I drag in some trees to estimate the size of the plane. Personally, I use the Blender add-on called Botaniq, mainly because it has great assets and a good curve tool, as well as being pretty easy to use. After that, I add a camera and tilt it a little so I can build the composition around it. Make sure to get good references for the scene you want to build. A good website for that is called Unsplash. I drag the images I get into an app called PureRef. I'll leave a link to both of these in the description. Now I arrange the foliage using the curve tool from Botaniq. This way I get a minimal amount of assets while still covering the scene. You could use a particle emitter to scatter the trees around, but I like using the curve tool. Now I'm going off of this main reference image. It has a nice river snaking around the trees with overgrown foliage, as well as the ground around it being a steep incline into the river. This is good because it will hide the background, while still making it look full, with less assets needed. Also, these are the final camera settings I used, but I only enabled depth of field later so I can get a clear viewport image. When I'm done with the basic tree layout, I would start working on the terrain. But first, I set up the viewport for a rendered cycles view. Here are the settings I use to decrease lag. Then I use the PSA Atmosphere add-on for quick temporary lighting. I will do my own custom lighting later. Also, make sure to constantly save, because nothing's worse than crashing. Now for the terrain, I add a lot of subdivisions onto the plane and then sculpt in the detail. It doesn't need to be that pretty. I personally only spent about 5 minutes on it. It just needs to convey some natural hills and valleys. Also, it's very important to keep in mind the scale of the scene when you're sculpting. I make sure to have a relatively steep drop for the water, and have the elevation increase the further out in the scene. This way it fills the background more, which I think looks better. Now Botaniq has a snap to surface tool, which is very useful in this circumstance. That's another reason why I recommend Botaniq. It's because it makes my workflow much easier. Now it is pretty expensive, with the version I use being $50, so if you can't afford that, that's great, but if not, I would just wait for a sale or to use something else. Gscatter is also good, and I've heard Arborea is another good option. Then I add a plane for water. For a temporary material, I just turn down the roughness and turn the transmission up for a temporary texture. Then I fix the sculpt a little to fit the foliage. Now for the grass texture, remember that simple is good. Try to not have it be visually repeating. And overall, it's not super important what texture you use, because most of it will probably be hidden by 3D grass. I personally spent a long time looking for a texture, much longer than I should have. And for this I used a free add-on called Blender Kit. It has lots of models and textures and much more. Link in the description. Now if you do select a texture that repeats, there's a great video by Ryan King Art that goes over how to fix this. Now I just do a quick tweak and change the color management to filmic and set medium-high contrast. After that I extend the water a little bit so it's almost like a lake, and this also fills in the background. Now I import mountains from Sketchfab as a main background source. Now if you can't see far away in the viewport, you can extend the N setting in the view tab, and you'll also have to do this for the camera. I set it to about 20,000. Now there's nice reflections from the mountain on the camera. Also make sure the mountains are massive and very far away, so it has about the proper scale. This will help with some of the atmosphere effects. For the sky I use a plane with an image plugged into it. I found the sky image on Unsplash. You could also use an HDRI, but I personally find I have more control with just image planes. Now for the texture, plug the image in and give it a little emission. Originally, I wanted it to be a nice sunset scene, but I changed it because I couldn't do that well. Once again, I'll redo the lighting later. Now I add in a cube, which will be the volume, and for that, these are the settings I used. After that, I tweaked some export settings, and this is what I ended up using at the very end. For now, I did a test render to see what it's looking like. For test renders, I typically make the samples very low so it doesn't take forever. Now the scene's starting to come together, but it's still missing many things. Now I start on the riverside with the overgrown bushes. I once again use the curve tool from Botaniq to quickly spread around multiple bushes. Also, if you want a full Botaniq tutorial, just let me know. I'm going to speed this process up a little. And while this goes on, you should comment any Blender tutorials or videos you want to see. Also, I was thinking about linking this Blender file, but I'm not sure if that's fine with the add-ons I used. So if any of you know about that, please let me know. For the curve I'm placing around the riverbank, I make sure to have it overgrown and messy, but also to leave some empty spots, because it doesn't make sense to have it all filled up with the same shrubbery. Now I do the other side. After that, I set up some grass assets into a curve. It's good to have some height and plant variation, but don't do too much because it'll make the scene look messy and incohesive. I typically suggest having only one flower type unless you're having a field or a meadow. Now, because having thousands of grass assets causes a lot of strain on the PC, I make sure to only place it in the empty spots of the scene. This is another good reason why you should set up the larger parts before the smaller parts, such as having the trees and bushes in place before placing the grass, because then you'll know where to place it and where to not. And this can help greatly with lag. A good way to locate the empty spots is to look in camera view and press shift and right click to move the global cursor, then place a grass in only those areas. Now's another reminder to save, because Blender tends to crash a lot, or at least I crash a lot while placing these grass assets. Once I think that starts to look good, I'll add in another volume to the mountains. After that, I'll do another test render. I think it's definitely starting to look better, although the lighting is certainly a little dull. In my reference images, there's much more color and the shadows are much harsher. So now I'm going to restart the lighting, but before that I have to make sure I crash 20 times. To start, I remove all the background lighting, then I added in a sun. These are the final settings I used, with a slight orientation into the camera. Next, I add in an HDRI. This helps with some of the background light. I found mine on Polyhaven. While I'm using their paid add-on, you can find many for free on their website. Also, make sure you angle the HDRI to fit the lighting on the image plane. Next, I start on making the water texture. For this, I followed a video by Stash. The basic material was simply just a noise texture into a bump node, then plugged into the normal. Then again, turned the roughness down and the transmission up. Then I did some volume type stuff, and this is the final material I used in the end. Getting a properly scaled ripple is very important. If you have issues with your texture, make sure to Ctrl A and select scale to apply the scale. Now with the main scene done, it was time for just little touch-ups, such as adding volumes and fog. The way I got some interesting fog is using the Alt-Tab Easy Fog 2 add-on. It does have a free version, but I'm using the $30 paid version with all of their assets. Now when adding a volume, make sure to keep the density very low. I do a couple test renders to see how it looks, and then I tweak it a little. Now it's time for the Blender compositing. I usually just copy and paste these nodes that I use for every scene, and then adjust the glare accordingly. I tried adding a little boat as a point of interest. It probably could have worked, but I'm not the greatest, so I ended up deleting it in the end. Now we're left with the final render, but it's still not done, because it's time for everyone's favorite part, the post-editing compositing workflow thing. Now I personally do this in Photopea, because I can't afford Photoshop. But either way, I'm basically copying this Max Hay video. So if you use Photoshop, then just follow this. But if you're using Photopea, you can stay around, I guess. Now I'll show my process. You ready? Duplicate image, add blur, decrease opacity, set to screen display. Add adjustment curve layer, slide middle down a little. Drag lens dirt overlay, link in description. Set to screen display. Add raster mask. Add a brush fall off and opacity, color overlay areas. Duplicate all layers and merge, convert to smart image, and add a raw camera filter. Increase exposure, increase contrast, increase highlights, decrease shadows, leave white because image is nearly overexposed. Decrease blacks, increase texture and clarity. Increase vibrance and saturation, add sharpen effect. Drag film grain overlay, link in description. Set to screen overlay, decrease opacity. Drag in vignette, decrease opacity. Add color lookup adjustment layer. Change LUT, decrease opacity. Add curves adjustment layer, adjust slightly, and you're done. Now this is the before editing and after. If you have any questions or suggestions, please comment. That's all from me today. Goodbye now.